There are no cars in Venice. You can only go by boat or by foot, and they have public boats. They're called vaporetto. And there are police boats, there are fire engine boats, there are even garbage truck boats. When I gave birth to our first child, I drove myself to the hospital on a boat. Passover, we get all of our kosher food, but even the matzah we get delivered on a boat, which is really ironic.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have the incredible Shachar Banim, who is the Chabad Rebbitson of Venice, Italy, the oldest Jewish ghetto. And she is also a global speaker, and she is the founder of Rebbitson Unplugged. So this is going to be a very interesting interview. Rebbitson Shachar Banim, thank you so much for joining us.
Chana, thank you for having me. You pull the extraordinary out of the ordinary, and we're in extraordinary Venice on Shlichus, so we're going to have a
Yes,
lot of great
which
things to talk about.
absolutely. So it is a really extraordinary place. Tell us a little about the history of Venice, Italy, because it has so much going on.
Yeah, Venice is very unique. Maybe your audience knows, but there are absolutely no cars in Venice. It's a
Mm.
city that's 1,000 years old, built up in the middle of the sea. And actually, Rashi, the Torah's foremost commentator, makes reference to Venice in the first Torah portion in Bereshis, in the Haftorah, actually. It's Isaiah, and it talks about the people living in the sea. And Rashi says,
Oh, wow.
Zos Venetia, this is Venice. So when we know that the the physical world mirrors what's going on in the spiritual world. So if it's mentioned already in the very beginning of the Torah, we know that there's a lot of spirituality there. And so we're trying to pull
Wow.
out all of the physical, elevate the physical to the spiritual. But as I said, there are
Wow.
no cars in Venice.
So how
And
do you how do you travel? Where do you like you go on boats? You go like
yes,
how do you
you can only go by boat or by foot, and they
uh,
have public boats. They're called vaporetto, and you'll see the vaporettos going around. You'll also see, very interestingly,
so you need
uh,
to call a taxi, you call, hey boat.
right,
Wow.
there are taxi boats. There are private taxi boats, which are a little bit more elegant. Most
Mm,
people that go on a boat, tourists and residents, go on the vaporetto.
mm,
And there are police boats, there are fire
mm.
engine boats,
Oh,
there
wow.
are even garbage truck boats.
Boats.
And it's really an extraordinary way to get around, but you can get around the whole city by
So
foot.
the water is like going through the main thoroughways? Like how is it? And on the side there's
Yes.
streets?
Yes, there is like the main highway on the east coast of America. I'm
Right.
American by birth.
Right.
You have the I-95 that goes north to south. So there's the main artery that goes through Venice. It's called Strada Nuova, New Street. And all to the left and the right, you've got all different hundreds of tiny little streets with scores, more than that, hundreds and hundreds of bridges
Mm.
all over the city. So you can get around Venice by walking. In fact, speaking of boats, when I gave birth to our first child, I drove
Oh, wow.
myself to the hospital on a boat.
On a boat, wow. So you have your own boat that you use for your transportation?
We had a boat.
Boat,
It had a
wow.
little problem and kind of sunk under the
Oh
water.
my gosh.
So
Wow.
the fire, how do you call the fire stuff? Firemen, they had to come. The firemen, they came,
Mhm.
and I was going to
And
say
rescued
fire
you?
squad, but that doesn't sound so good. They came. They had to retrieve the boat, get it out from under the water, but
Oh my
excuse me,
gosh,
but of
wow.
course, you can't use the boat anymore. It's completely ruined. So hopefully we'll get another
Wow.
boat someday. If anybody
But you were
remembers the Ford Pinto, it was like a Ford Pinto, so it wasn't such a big
Uh,
loss.
so you took you took your own boat to drive to the hospital when you were giving birth?
Right.
Wow. And your
Yes.
boat worked then?
Thank goodness. Thank goodness we got there.
Wow.
I didn't have to swim
Wow.
part of the way. It would have been like marathon, drive the boat, swim, give birth.
So are there ever, like, traffic, a lot of traffic in like, the rush hours that we have here
That's a great
In America?
question. In the mornings, it's really fascinating to see, in Venice, it's a very touristy city, so there are a lot of hotels there, and you can
Mm,
actually see all the deliveries in the early morning hours. So you'll see
mhm.
deliveries to restaurants, you'll see deliveries to hotels, and part of the deliveries that you'll see are bed sheets and pillowcases all
Oh.
stacked and enclosed, so everything stays nice and clean. It doesn't get wet. Um, Interestingly, about not getting, things full of the canal water, you know, Passover, we get all of our kosher food,
Matzah.
but even the
Right.
matzah we get delivered on a boat, which is really
Oh, wow.
ironic because we spend so much effort to have shmura matzah, handmade matzah, where it's guarded from the time that the wheat is planted to make sure that it doesn't become wet and doesn't ferment and become chametz. And then after all of
It's
that, when
true.
it finally arrives, gets through customs and all the stories that we have over the years with issues with getting, matzah and esrogim and all kinds of things for the holidays through customs. Finally, we get the matzah through customs, and it arrives on a boat surrounded by water. I
By
literally have
water.
to step on the boat, sign for the matzah, and then everything gets taken off very, very carefully.
Wow, wow. So I'm sure that, like, affects the whole culture of the place, of Venice, because there isn't regular roads and cars and all that, like, it's a very different way of living, I guess.
Yes, it is definitely a different way of
Mhm,
living. It's more of a slow living, if you will.
mhm,
You don't have the background noise and the air
mm.
pollution. Certainly, boats make noise, and you'll hear the public vaporetto. You'll hear them honking these very loud
I was
foghorns,
just gonna say the honking of New York City,
right?
everyone's beeping. Right.
Right. But usually, they honk if they're coming around a corner that
Mm.
where they have a blind spot, so to let an oncoming boat know that they are arriving.
And
But it's very unique.
how wide is that strait? Like, how many boats can go through it at one time?
Well, it depends on the canal. Gam Gam, our
Mhm,
kosher restaurant, is on the largest canal besides the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal, which
mhm,
is that artery that goes through the entire city of Venice, the largest and deepest, the widest and deepest canal. The next to that is called the Cana Reggio. We're going to give an Italian lesson to the whole audience today. So, the Canal Cana Reggio, which is also named after the area, you could definitely pass, two vaporettos can pass.
mm.
Uh, like a what do you call it? A two-way street. I forget all of my driving jargon.
Wow.
People laugh at me,
Uh,
play the where I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. People say, "Oh yeah, meet me at so and so." I'm like, "Well, what's the street? Where
right.
is that?" I
Wow. Yeah, you probably get unused to driving as well because you don't
Yes,
drive there. Wow,
yes,
interesting.
absolutely.
So what's it like to live in a place that I mean, you service a lot of tourists. There must be do you have any numbers of how many tourists come through and what kind of service you do for them? Tell us a little about your shlichus there.
Well, my husband and I have been there for about 30 years, and Venice
Mhm,
is a very unique city, and there is a beautiful local community, very small. I would say by now, maybe around 300, 350 people in the community.
mm,
And we try to help everyone as much as possible with whatever it is that they need, bringing lulavim and esrogim or any holiday needs. People come to our shul for the daily minyan if they just want to pray or if they have to say Kaddish, because the Chabad shul offers the only daily minyan in the city.
mm,
And the old synagogues also are so beautiful. And there's a tour that people can take, and they can go in and see the antiquities. It's something very special and unique.
How old are the synagogues that are there?
The synagogues are about 500 years old,
Wow.
and it's just a very unique city. We have hundreds, probably more people that are in the actual community come to us on an average Shabbos. We get about
Mm.
250, 300 people for a regular Shabbos. And then during the summer,
Wow.
it really kicks up where we'll have, I hope you're sitting, 600, 700, 800
Wow.
people each Shabbos. And it's not just 800 people. It means 800 for dinner, 800 for lunch, also Suda Shlishis. And you could think about Lechem Mishneh, when you make the two challahs for each person that's going to say the hamotzi, the
Oh,
blessing over the
wow.
bread. So there's a lot going on. And
How do you handle that? Like, how do you handle so many people coming through
I always say
logistically,
big breath
food-wise?
and big
Yeah, every
pots, big breath
right.
and big pots. And, you just take everything in stride. And the bottom line is, we're not alone. We know that God is with us in everything that we do. But more so, there's a concept that the Mishaleach, the one who sends, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that the Shluchim are the hand of the Rebbe. So we know that we're not alone. And anything that comes our way, anything that needs to be done, obviously there's a way to get it done. So I noticed that when you are calm and relaxed, it's easier to think with clarity, and it takes a little bit of planning. But
Mm.
I think one of the most
Sounds like a lot of planning for 800, 900
it's
people.
true, it's true, but after a few decades, you get in the swing of things.
Wow.
When you're dealing with a mixer for the challah dough that can hold, you know, 12, 13 kilo of flour. I mean, what are we talking about? About 30 pounds of flour
Mm.
in
Wow.
in one batch of dough. And I think in the largest Shabbos that we've had in the summer, I counted that we did the batch of dough 10 times.
10 times.
So
Wow.
10 times, 30 pounds of dough, that's a ton of challah. And it's kind of like my therapy, just
Are you saying that you're
roll,
involved?
braid.
Are
Yes.
you saying that you personally do all the baking and the cooking?
So there's something magical that I would highly impress upon people to try. It's a life tip extraordinaire. It's called delegating. So
Right,
for many, many
absolutely.
years, I did the baking for Shabbos by myself.
Mm.
I had two little people accompanying me. My kids used to
Best helpers, right?
my kids, even before that, they used to, we had car seats, which of course we don't need in Venice, but my kids would sleep in the car seats when they were
I
babies.
see.
They would sleep in the car seats up on the counter in the kitchen of the restaurant of Gam Gam while I did the
Wow.
baking. And it wasn't just Shabbos baking. We're also talking about, a restaurant, you have to have bread and pizza and cakes and cookies. So the baking is fresh every day, which means that
Wow.
every night when the restaurant closes at 10, at 11 o'clock, I would start baking, and I would bake from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, every single
No,
night of the
that's
week.
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Wow.
so this went on for a long time, and I had a Shabbos guest. She had a beautiful necklace on. I complimented her, and she said, "Oh, I got this for the birth of my, I don't know, let's call him Shlomo." So I said, "Oh, it's really lovely, and it's a beautiful concept." So I said to my husband the next day, I said, I met this guest. Her husband buys her a piece of jewelry every time she gives birth. I said, keep the diamonds, just get me a baker."
Right. For sure. Wow. Yeah, you
So
can't
so
do that all
eventually
yourself.
we delegated. Yeah. But at that
What
point in our shlichos, I had to do it because I was the only one that could do it.
mm,
And the important thing about
mm,
delegating is that things won't always be exactly the way you want them or exactly as you would do it. But that's okay because
mm,
I always say a temporary um, inconvenience is worth it
mhm.
for a permanent improvement. So
100%.
What's
And that's
so
something we have to learn as women, I think. Like, it's
Yes,
we're so into, like, controlling everything and making it perfect, and we just have to sometimes take that step back.
right.
But it's not like you're taking the step back because 'cause you're still on charge of the whole. I mean, this is a whole production every Shabbos,
Yes.
it sounds like.
Yes,
Besides
absolutely.
for the actual baking and the cooking, it's still arranging everything and managing,
Right.
being the CEO on top of it all.
You're right.
Do you
I I was going
I'm
to
wondering.
say oh.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Tell
I
me.
was gonna say I always say your shlichus changes as your life changes, and anyone can relate to this. You know, we have different phases in our lives.
Mhm,
Um, when you're single, when you're married, if you have children, things change. Children get
mhm,
older, and you're able to do different things. The important thing about delegating, even if the coleslaw is not going to taste exactly as you would do it, or
mhm,
even if something isn't going to look, the table setting isn't going to look exactly in the forks in the exact position or the napkin folded exactly as you want. What happens is that delegating and following up with people allows it's freeing. It's really liberation because you have to give over sometimes things that other people can do, even if it's not
mhm,
perfect in your eyes,
mhm,
so that you can do the things that only you can do. Those
100%.
things, not only are you will it help the world, whatever you're giving over, but it also helps you. It helps you
Mhm,
maximize your potential. And if you want to feel like you are living in the highest capacity that you can, and if you really want to acknowledge that God created you, each one of us for a particular reason, everyone has a special talent. Sometimes we don't even recognize it. We take one little step forward and then everything will play out. And you can never realize what your potential is if you don't allow yourself to share. And it's not just delegating and handing off, it's actually sharing. Our staff knows that people aren't just coming into a regular restaurant and just eating
mhm,
and leaving. I explained to the staff when I trained them that when somebody comes into Gam Gam, the majority of the people there will be saying a blessing over the food that you bring
mhm,
them to the table. They are
mm.
actually going to be elevating the food that you bring. So don't just feel like you're a server. You are actually enabling people to make the world a better place.
Hmm. That's like, talk about, like, elevating physicality. That's beautiful. So
Precisely.
everything that you're doing is so. Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, if you're up baking from 11 to 7 in the morning, you can't do that much. You're a human
Right.
being, so it's so important that you do delegate.
Yeah.
What made you decide to open the restaurant Gum Gum?
So there was a need for kosher food. So my husband
Mhm,
opened the restaurant and with the purpose that travelers will be able to come and eat. And it actually allows someone to stay in the city overnight and for longer durations of time. So
mhm,
whereas Venice may have been a day trip for somebody who was, let's say, somebody who keeps kosher, now people will come. Not only do they come for a day and overnight, but they'll come specifically for a whole Shabbos, or they'll even stay for an entire week long yontiv, a week long holiday
mm,
like
mm,
Passover or Sukkot. So the interesting thing is that it also allows people who are not even Jewish to be able to come in and see and experience a little bit of Jewish culture. And Gam Gam
mm.
is located right at the main entrance of the ghetto, so you can't help but not see it when you come to the city and come to this area.
Wow. Can you tell us a little about the ghetto? Like, tell us a little about the history of it.
It's very unique in that it was the first ghetto that was established. The word ghetto that we know today actually
Mhm,
originates from the ghetto in Venice. And long story short, the Jews were locked in the ghetto. You know, in the time when the Jews were leaving Spain and the expulsion, and Jews were being pushed out from everywhere, they were allowed to come to Venice and they
mhm,
were given this small area that you could walk across in less than 5 minutes from the front
mm,
to the back. And they were not allowed to leave at night. There was a curfew. And first of all, it's not as beautiful as it wasn't back then as beautiful as it
mhm,
is now. It was
mm,
part of the name ghetto comes from an iron foundry. So this was an area that wasn't very clean, certainly
Mhm.
wasn't very beautiful. So they were pushed into this area and they were not allowed to leave at night. There was a curfew. And there
Mm.
were guards, there were actual gates locking them in at night, locking the Jews in, and they were forced to have guards at the gates, and the city taxed the Jews to pay for the guards. And
Mm.
during the day, they were allowed to go out, to go to work. There were laws against mingling amongst everyone, and they were allowed to go out as long as they had some kind of marking showing that they were Jews, a yellow
Mhm.
star, a special colored hat, a special colored bandana. And this caused a lot of problems for the Jews because obviously they stood out. Nowadays, we stand out with pride. We're proud
Mhm.
to for the men to have a yarmulke, for the women to dress like a royal queen, for the men to have their tzitzis flying. Now we can be proud wherever we go of being a Jew. But back then, it was much different. And um, there were also particulars in that, for instance, in the Middle Ages, hygiene wasn't exactly as
Mhm.
it is today. So
Mhm.
when there was the Black Plague, which killed millions of people, unfortunately, all throughout Europe, many Jews were saved. Why? I wonder if anyone in your audience could guess.
Why is that?
Because they did something called Nägelwasser. Nägelwasser
Oh,
is a
washing.
special ritual
Mm.
washing that we do upon waking and also at different points throughout the day. And
Mm.
because of this incredible mitzvah, it really protected the Jews. So that was good, except to the outsider, it made it look
Right.
like, oh,
Like,
the Jews
why are
aren't
they saved?
dying.
Right. They
They
must
must
have
have.
they must have caused it. Right.
Right,
They must.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. Typical
Wow.
scapegoating of the Jew. But of course, in Judaism and Torah, we value life. Every single life is important and matters. So it
Mhm.
goes without saying the Jews had nothing to do with the plague and they were saved
Right.
because of this incredible mitzvah.
Wow. So how long has I mean, you said when it started, the ghetto, how long has it
Right.
been? Was it in use? Like, for how long?
It was about 300 years. The ghetto
300
was
years.
started in the 1500s, and then it was
Mm.
liberated by Napoleon and the French Revolutionary Army in the 1800s. And interestingly, the gates came down and there was liberation. But when the Jews were in the ghetto, they kept together. They were close
Mm.
together. They spent holidays together. They prayed together. But once there was liberation and then they spread out just naturally, you know, it's okay to go out into the world. We're physical people. We need to be out in the world. But they lost a little bit of that communal aspect. And the Alter
Mm.
Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, actually makes reference to this, that this was part of the intent of some people to scatter the Jews so that they couldn't be as close knit. The important point of this is that community is
So
so
important.
important,
Yeah.
so
And being
important.
and being proud of who you are, I guess,
Yes.
the message to them was that they I guess they didn't feel that pride, or at least some of them didn't feel that pride in their difference because they were talked about as the other in a negative way, but the importance of feeling that dignity and pride in who you are.
Yes, the
Right.
outsiders, people who weren't Jewish definitely looked upon the Jews in a negative light.
Right.
And there are righteous people in every place and in every
Sure.
generation, thank goodness. But the majority of people in that situation looked down. Obviously,
Right.
you can't say nowadays, oh, but they were trying to protect the Jews, which I
No,
hear
of
some
course
of
not.
the independent tour guides going around saying. The
Oh,
reality
wow.
is you don't lock somebody in at night, force them to have guards, force them to pay for the guards, and make them wear a label and not allow them to integrate into society, and what's the word? Socialize with society
Mhm.
if you're really just trying to protect them.
100%. So what does the Jewish ghetto look like today? Like, what's there now?
It's
Is it
so
just a tourist
interesting.
area?
As you walk through, when you get to the main entrance of the ghetto, I have goosebumps. You can actually see in the passageway of the ghetto, you can see on the sides of the walls holes of in the concrete where the ghetto doors actually would slam closed every night and be locked.
Mm,
You can still see it.
wow.
And when you can feel the stone, it's like cold, and you can imagine what it was like in those times. And Gum Gum is right there at the entrance. And as you walk in, you can actually see in the wall, on the outer wall of the restaurant, you can actually see where the checkpoint most likely was. There's
Mhm,
bars and it looks like a window, and on the other side, it used to be the wall of the restaurant, and I said to my husband, "You know, I did some research and it seems like this was the actual checkpoint. I'm cutting a hole
mm.
in the wall." He
Ah,
said, "What?" I said, "Yes, I'm cutting a hole and putting glass because these iron bars were the epitome of lack of freedom. And now when
right.
people look inside Gam Gam and they see the singing and the joy and the happiness of holidays and or Shabbat or even during the week, there's just a wonderful vibe in the restaurant when there's Jewish and non-Jewish alike coming in. This is I want there to be a glass window instead of
Mm,
that concrete wall to show that we are living in a time of incredible liberation where we are so liberated, even with all the challenges that go
mhm,
on in the world. We're living in such special times that we have at our disposal. A Jew can show his Judaism, can learn as much as he wants. He can even spend, there's no reason why every single Jew on the planet can't learn 5 minutes of Torah. They can just
mhm,
go online, even in their pocket, and just
mhm,
look and listen to something like a wonderful podcast or
mhm,
just to read something about the Torah portion. People ask me all the time, there's so much with Torah. I didn't grow up in
mm,
an observant home. Where should I begin? I say, just take a step forward. Just begin. There's so much at our disposal and partner up with somebody, find somebody in your community. And it's really nice to be able to have a chevrusa coming from the word chaver, from friend, to be able to sit and
mhm.
learn with someone. Maybe it's 15
For
minutes,
sure.
maybe it's a half hour.
Absolutely. Do you find that there's anti-Semitism a lot in Venice?
There's anti-Semitism everywhere. It's
Everywhere?
a very good question, a valid question, and I get asked this question very often. We even see anti-Semitism, unfortunately, in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. So how much more
Sure.
so we see it outside of Israel? I
Mhm,
will say that it's not as some other European countries. We don't have to say the
mhm,
names,
mhm.
but everybody knows what we're
Right,
talking about here.
right.
It's very, very quiet, and the authorities take it very, very seriously. In
Mm,
decades, I had only heard two people say something. I was told that there was
mhm,
an incident where somebody shouted something, and the shouters were not Italian. They were also tourists from another country.
mm.
And in recent years, there's been a little bit of an uptick, but as I said, the authorities are very serious about it. And people who try their luck, so to speak, it's not tolerated.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. My
So
husband,
you spoke
people say, is it safe to go around with a yarmulke?
right.
And I say,
Yeah.
"Well, listen, my husband doesn't take his beard off."
Right,
I
right.
always say,
That's
it's there for our protection because the yarmulke is reminding us of our connection with Hashem, with God,
right,
and having I always say, so if it's there to help us, then it's not good not to wear it. And of
right.
course, the women are born on a higher spiritual level inherently. So we know deep inside, we have this extra level of bina, of understanding. So we have a greater awareness of our relationship with God and an awareness of God. So it's not that we
It's kind
don't
of
get to
inborn.
wear a yarmulke, it's that we don't
Right,
need to wear a yarmulke. Whereas the guys,
right.
they need that little extra reminder of who's actually in charge. We have our own free will and we have to
Right.
work hard, but there's somebody ultimately running the whole show.
Absolutely, which brings me to the next question, which is like, you have so many people that come through. do unexpected things happen that you need to have the help of the one above? Like, I'm sure in planning like a Shabbaton for 500, 800, 600, even 300 or 100 people, it's a lot of things, a lot of mishaps happen. Have you ever had things that unexpected things
Well, I
going
know.
happening?
So introducing the week-long podcast by Chana Weisberg. So if I had to pull just a few things that pop in my mind, um, we've had emergencies and mishaps and also positive things that come out of a
Mhm.
situation that you would never expect. It's all positive ultimately. Once Erev Pesach, in the middle of Pesach cooking, we have an industrial oven. It's not as big as everybody thinks. Everybody says, "Well, you have all those people. You must have an extraordinarily big kitchen." No, it's
Yeah,
probably
really?
half the size of the kitchen, like of a standard American kitchen. But
Oh, wow.
in the
Yeah.
middle of cooking for Pesach, the oven has two walls of glass, and the outer wall, fortunately, shattered in
Mm.
a gazillion pieces. No
Wow.
time to bring somebody in. You can't take the door off and go send it out and have it brought back in a few days. And it wasn't exactly safe to cook with just the one panel of glass. But I said,
Sure.
Hashem, I'm looking at all the options, and there's really no option except to cook. And I've got a few hundred people to cook for Passover Seders. So I'm giving this one over to you. I'm going to have faith that you are going to make sure that glass stays intact. And it did. We've
Wow.
had
Wow.
mishaps where very sad mishaps. One of the things that Italy is famous for is for the Alps. It's connected
Mm.
the Italian Alps, the French Alps, the Swiss Alps. So a lot of people go snow skiing, and there have been, unfortunately, medical emergencies, and there have been even, sadly to say, even people that come for a vacation and have even Hashem decided that their time was finished. It's hard to
Mm.
say it. People have passed away,
Mm.
and we've in the middle of the night have to um, are not have to, but like are honored to be able to
Mm.
help a family that does not even live in the country, that doesn't speak the language, that doesn't even know where to begin, to bring their loved one back home for a proper Jewish burial, which is so
Wow.
important because once a once a person passes away, until a proper Jewish burial, the soul, the neshama, is in a state of like chaos a little bit. And so
Mhm.
to be able to help people, even in this kind of situation, is something extraordinary. On the flip side, we've had unexpected, very apparent happy things. Would you like to hear a little
Of
story?
course. Sure. Sure. Tell us.
So, um, somebody came up to me in the Jewish ghetto. It's a big I was saying that from the entrance of the ghetto, you see Gam Gam, and as you walk along, then you'll see a few doors down on the other side of the road, you'll see, and by the way, we don't really call them road, we call it calle. So there's the next
Yeah.
Italian word for you, calle. On the other side of the calle, you'll see Gam Gam Goodies. So Gam Gam is fleishik and Gam Gam Goodies is dairy. People come and
Oh,
have
wow.
real Italian pizza, cappuccino, and all the good Italian and Jewish specialties.
Do
And
does before you conti does gum gum mean something, or is that just
that's a great
what you thought?
question. Gam gam means gam in Hebrew means both or also. So it's Jewish food and also Italian
Uh,
food.
oh, okay,
Um,
cute.
there's also a very special gematria that was only discovered, of course, after the restaurant was named. I'm going to leave it up to your audience to guess what the gematria is. They could leave it down in the comment section.
Uh,
And
I hope you'll comment and tell us. Wow.
so as you continue through the first part of the ghetto, then you cross a
Mhm.
bridge and you're in the main ghetto square. And it's really
Mhm.
extraordinary because the buildings are, they call them the skyscrapers of Venice. They're the tallest buildings, and they're very colorful and very unique. And some of the you'll see buildings that the roofs are the same height. But one building, you can count the stories, has 5 stories, and the building right next to it has 4 stories. What does it mean? It means that somebody had to insert when there was no room in the time of the actual enclosed ghetto. Jews couldn't build out. They could
Mm.
only build upward,
Up.
hence the
Mm.
tall buildings. And when they ran out of room, they actually had to divide an apartment not in half, but they had to create a ceiling and a floor to create another
Oh,
whole
wow.
level within that same
Wow.
space. So it's very interesting to see. But when you cross the bridge into the ghetto during December, you'll see a beautiful 25-foot menorah standing nice and proud.
Wow.
And during the fall holidays, you'll see a big sukkah that we have available. We make a big sukkah by Gam Gam for the restaurant. We make one by the synagogue so that 24/7 a person can come with their own food and have a sukkah available for them
Mhm.
because in Venice
Beautiful.
people don't really have backyards, people don't really have balconies where they can build a whole sukkah, and
Mhm.
so we have that available for people. And
How large is your Pesach Seder usually?
the Pesach Seder is not as big as Shabbos. We have about
Mhm.
300 people for Pesach Seder.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And people
And
come, we make all the meals, but what's unique is we're not just going to a place and, cleaning up one place and having it there. We kosher gam gam for Passover.
wow.
So the whole
Wow.
restaurant is open for all of the intermediate days for Chol Hamoed. It's really interesting. So in the ghetto square, one day
Mhm.
I was saying a young lady came up to me and she said, "Are you the Rebbitson?" I said, "Hi, I'm Shachar Banin. How can I help you? Welcome to Venice." And she said, "Oh, my name is Shachar." I said, "Ah,
Mm.
that's great." So she said, "My parents came to Venice." I said, "Oh, really? When?" She said, "About 20 years ago."
Mm.
So I thought, this girl looks almost 20. There's got to be some kind of interesting story here. She said, "My parents came to Venice at the same time, but they weren't together. My mother came with her girlfriends. My father came with his guy friends, and you invited all of them into the sukkah for the sukkah meal, for the
Wow.
holiday meal." So she said it was very interesting. You sat all the girls on one side and you sat all the
Ah.
boys on one side and you put the families in between. So, well, of
Ah.
course, naturally. So she said they took notice of each other
Mhm.
across the sukkah.
Wow.
And the sukkah, by the way, has windows. So one side is all open, and then the other side has windows, so you could look out onto the canal and watch the boats going by. Can you imagine sitting in a sukkah and seeing
Such a
boats going by?
romantic place.
Right?
Wow.
So she
Gorgeous.
said that they took notice of each other, and they exchanged some information, they stayed in touch, they dated, they got married,
Mm. Isn't that nice?
and
Wow.
so a sukkah
A
is
match made in
a
Sukkot in
match made
Venice.
it.
Wow.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Wow.
sometimes you have extraordinary things that happen that
Mhm.
seem not good.
Mhm.
And because I say it in that way, because we know ultimately everything is for the good. We have a very narrow vision, but the
Mhm.
bigger picture, it's like if you have a book and you hold it right up to your face, you can hardly read it. But if you pull it back, then the words focus and everything, the story comes into view. So we have a limited view. So even things that seem not good, we know and we're told and we believe that it's ultimately for the good. And then we have things that are apparently, out in the open good, and
And
very,
it's
very
it's really
special.
the perspective and the belief. I mean, having your glass panel on your oven right before
Right.
Pesach,
Right.
breaking, that's a lot of faith that you have
Yes.
to have.
Yes,
Wow.
absolutely. We had another gorgeous story where a woman came in on Shabbat. She came to Shabbat lunch at Gam Gam. And in the days, nowadays people can reserve ahead on jewishvenice.org. They could come reserve for Shabbat and for whatever they need, any holiday, or contact us for information. But in the beginning, remember I said as your life changes, your shlichus changes and etc.
Right.
So in the
Sure.
beginning, it was more just a communal meal at Gam Gam and everybody just came.
Mhm.
And one woman that was with us for Shabbat lunch, she came to me afterwards and she said, "Oh, thank you so much. Everything was delicious. I had a great time. It was so nice to sit with people from all over the world. And even though I don't keep Shabbat at home, this really gave me such inspiration. And there were songs that I remembered from when I was little." So that is very common to hear
Yeah.
things like that. But
That's really
what was interesting about this story, she said, I walked here, it took me a while. I walked all the way from the cruise ship. What did it mean? She was on a cruise, and cruises dock at the port in Venice. And she said, there's actually a rabbi on our cruise. I don't
mm,
recall if he was on the way to somewhere else to do a program or he was doing something on the ship, but she said she feels bad for him because he packed all his own food and he really
mm.
doesn't have anything hot and certainly doesn't have meat or anything. And I said, Cholent. Cholent, of course, the delicious stew of meat and potatoes and that we eat on every Shabbat afternoon that sits before Shabbat. You put it on the stove. It's like crock pot, but 1,000 times better. So I thought, you know, and I ran and said to my husband, is the port in the Eruv? Because there's an Eruv.
Right.
It's a special boundary that allows you to transport and carry things and on Shabbat. In any case, the important part is I gave her a huge thing of cholent and I said, you could bring this to the rabbi and I'm sure he'll enjoy it. And it was very hot, so I had to wrap it up really well. And she took it and went on her way. And you plant seeds, you never know what's going to happen. It's just nice to be
Mm,
able to do something for someone. And what's even nicer is that we do it because we know it's a kindness and not because of how it makes us feel. So,
mm.
you always wonder how things pan out. Well, a few years later, she came back. She said, do you remember
Really?
me? I
Yeah.
said, yeah. I said, did you bring the rabbi the cholent?
Right.
she said, she said, not only did I bring the rabbi the cholent, but he was so touched that I schlepped it and carried it all the way because it wasn't exactly a close walk. We got to talking and we got married. I married the rabbi.
Wow.
So we have a sukkah that made the shidduch. We have the cholent that made the shidduch, made
Wow.
the shidduch match. Yeah, it's
That's
very, very
that's so
special.
nice.
Yeah.
And it's nice to get these, like, little anecdotes and stories, of
Yes.
things that you've helped. But do you ever feel a little burnt out? I mean, you're dealing with a lot of people, strangers who not strangers, because no one in the Jewish people is a stranger, but
Right.
you're dealing a lot with a lot of people who just come through your communities. You don't really have, like, a deep connection with them. Do you ever feel like there's burnout involved in just giving and giving all the time, and how do you avoid that?
It's a very, very good question. Back in the day, before there was all of this magical tech, I used to call there was a 718, that's the Brooklyn exchange, phone exchange. There was this 718 number that was a Torah hotline and you could call on the phone.
Yeah.
I I used to call this number. I would get a calling card, for 5
Right?
minutes. It cost like $10, whatever it was. I would call the 718 Torah hotline just to hear another Jewish voice.
Wow.
My, oh my, have things changed. Um,
Right.
you know, it's really important to always stay calm in a situation. And I think that
Mm,
really helps. It's not just about staying calm so you can get something done, but I think when you have this calmness and this awareness that there is the one above who's ultimately taking care of everything, it keeps you grounded in what your purpose is.
mm,
So, certainly a person can get tired. We're human beings. Our soul is uh, trapped but enclosed in this physical body. So we certainly can get tired, but there's a difference between being tired and being completely stressed and burnt out. And
mm,
if someone remains as calm as possible, it really helps keep things in perspective and definitely having faith that you are not alone in this world, that there is always a person, somebody else to reach out to, whether it's a
mm,
friend, whether it's a mashpia. A mashpia is a spiritual guide, a spiritual mentor that the Torah tells us in Ethics of Our Fathers. The Torah tells us, have a rabbi and get a spiritual mentor, somebody that can help you because our physical body is finite but our
mm.
soul is infinite. So if we are going to, I don't know, buy a big palace in Venice, we certainly wouldn't do the real estate contract by ourselves. We would get a real estate attorney who specializes in this. And if we're going to take such care and precision for a physical finite building, how much more so do we have to take care of our spiritual? So this really helps somebody avoid typical burnout.
Mhm.
Get sleep, eat as well as you can. Speaking of eating, it's easier now than it was for well over a decade, but we have to bring all the kosher food from not outside of Venice, from outside of
Right.
the country. So
Oh,
imagine
wow.
you're a family and you have to get all of your food from outside of the country. Now imagine you have a restaurant and you have 800 people coming for Shabbos. It's an
Wow.
extraordinary endeavor to be able
I'm
to do
ex
it.
I'm, like, envisioning all this food on this ship, on this boat
Right, right.
coming to
They
your
have very special refrigerated boats that come
Wow.
through and deliveries. There's offsite storage, and it's really a whole process that had to be developed over time. There weren't
Mm.
these routes. That it didn't
Mhm.
exist to bring kosher
Mhm.
food, certainly in this quantity from other countries, from companies, from to get Lubavitch meat all the way from another country in Europe, or to get dairy products from Israel and from France. All of these routes didn't exist. So everything, they say beginnings are hard, but if you have the end, you know, you think about what the end product also says, like what we say on Friday nights. You think about the end, and
Mm.
it's rooted. It's even the end is rooted in the beginning,
In the beginning, right.
and so beginnings aren't always easy, and that's okay. Nobody said life had to be easy. It's not always hard. Hard things happen. It's part of life. And as I said, that's why it's so important to always reach out to somebody, reach out to your spiritual mentor, reach out to a friend, reach out to somebody who, even somebody who is not your friend, who's more objective. That's one of the great reasons to have a spiritual mentor. It shouldn't be a buddy, shouldn't be somebody who knows all the nitty gritty about your life. It should be somebody older than you with more life experience than you that won't feel for you in the sense of the way a friend does. So that way they could give you objective information and guidance. But getting the food from abroad, it's definitely it's changed the way the entire shlichus has evolved, and it's still not
It's
easy. It seems easy now
Yeah.
because people come in, they
Yeah,
say, "Oh, you're
right.
so lucky. You could go out to eat whenever." Do you eat out every night? Wow, you don't even have. You're so lucky. You don't even have to cook.
Cook, right.
Yeah, sure, okay. Me bringing tiny kids to the restaurant is the same as you bringing tiny kids to the
Right,
restaurant, and the
of
only difference
course.
is that I'm not eating for free. I just prepay for all the food for when it
Right.
comes for when it
That's
comes
right.
on the boat. Our son, the oldest, he was 7 years old before we had milk.
Wow.
And we're
Wow.
talking about long life milk, which is the same type of milk that we have today. It's so funny. We were in New York when the kids were tiny, when they were maybe 3, 4, 5 years old. And we were having breakfast, and the kids were all together, boxes of, like God bless America, 10 boxes of cereal. And um, in Venice, we had kosher cornflakes. It was so
Mm.
special that you could go to the supermarket and buy kosher cornflakes. And so I never served it as breakfast cereal because I needed it as nosh. Nosh is,
Mm.
special treats
Right.
that you give to kids, and or the kids at heart. And so I would make these little baggies. They didn't even have Ziplocs. We're talking about baggies with the twist ties.
Right.
I would put in cornflakes, and I would buy raisins. Even the raisins, we had a special order. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Because the raisins that were sold in Venice, they have this wax coating which wasn't kosher. So we would have to special order and ship in raisins. So I would make these little baggies of cornflakes and raisins, something sweet and crunchy and fun. And this was nosh for the kids. So
Mm.
back to New York and breakfast, and all the kids have, all these cereals and bottles of milk and milk spilling everywhere, and it didn't
Mm.
it didn't matter.
Mm.
Whereas by us, every single drop was so important.
Of course.
So
Wow.
so our oldest, after breakfast, he came to me and said, "Mommy, the kids in New York, they're a little bit different." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because they put milk on their nosh."
That's funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
everything is perspective, and
I
no matter what the
are you
challenges, we can get through it.
Wow, I know when my grandkids come from they're also on shlichus, and they, they're when they come in the summer, they're shocked that you could just go to a big store around the corner. We have here in Muncie and Pomona, like, huge evergreen store where they could buy the
Right.
whole store is kosher, so much nosh, so much everything. So
Yes.
I'm just thinking, like, everything that you order, and you have to know that you need that amount of stuff. You can't just go
Right.
out and get a yogurt
Right.
from the corner store. So are you a very organized person, like with lists and all that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
you need to be.
I'm trying to think back to when I was small. I always liked things in order. As a teenager, I was very involved in the Jewish youth organization and on the board and active in getting membership and doing
Well,
programming for people.
tell us a little about your childhood. Like, did you ever think that you'd be a Chabad shliach in Venice?
I don't know that I thought about being a Chabad shliach, but I know that I wanted to be married to a rabbi because I thought the Rebbitson was so special. That's not why. I just wanted to be married to a rabbi. And I
Right.
thought that the Rebbitson is so special, but then I find out she's just a regular person.
Right.
But we grew up in a home that was really surrounded with the love of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism, and we were the house that everybody came to, the neighbors, the family, for all of the holidays. And you learn more as you go, and it's the biggest privilege to be a shluch of the Rebbe, to be able to I even if I sat here and tried, or even if I planned something to try to explain what it's like, there are really no words. There are no words to be a shluch of the Rebbe, an emissary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but there are also no words to be in a position where you get to help other people
Mm,
physically and spiritually. And as I said before, a neshama, a soul, is eternal. So it's a huge responsibility to be able to have an effect on a part of somebody's life that's eternal is something really extraordinary.
mm, wow. How long have you been in Venice on
We're
shlichus?
we're there about 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
And what made you choose Venice, or how did that happen?
So interestingly, my husband, he's Italian. That's another whole story in and of itself. Hashem definitely could have made all the ins and outs
Mhm.
a little easier. But that being said,
And you're from Fort Lauderdale, you said,
yes,
right?
yes. I'm
Yeah.
from New York originally, and my family did the Great Migration like many New Yorkers did, and we went
Right.
down to Florida. And the funny thing is how my husband and I met. I
Mhm.
um I was in Florida at the time, and I get a phone call from a friend, and she says, "I know this really nice guy that I think you're going to like." This was a married friend, and so her husband knew him, and he was a little bit like a Ben Pius, had Shabbos at her house, Shabbat meals at her home, etc. So she's telling me all this information, and she's going on and on for quite a while, like
Mm.
more than 5 minutes, and she's telling me every detail about this person, except one. Can you guess? She didn't say where he was. So I said, "Okay, where does he live?" And she said, "Venice." I said, "Well, I can tell by the sound of your voice you don't mean Venice, Florida. So you better mean Venice, California." And she said, "No, real Venice."
It is.
And the rest
Wow.
is ancient Jewish history.
So was he living there in Venice?
Yeah,
In Venice, Italy?
yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so he wrote
Interesting.
to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and asking for a bracha. He had this great idea to open a Chabad house. He wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe circled in big black marker, giving the affirmative, and tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of people later, here we are.
Wow. Tell us for a moment about your Rebbitson Unplugged, what that is.
Rebbitson Unplugged came because I wanted, in part because we have an international community. I don't have the opportunity if I invite somebody to a Rosh Chodesh class, a Jewish class at the beginning of the month, and say, well, if she doesn't come this time, I'll catch her next month.
Mhm.
Sometimes, if I'm lucky, I'll have a person for the whole Shabbat, maybe just one
Mhm.
Shabbat meal. Sometimes I have somebody on a Tuesday just walking by and asking me a historical question, and I have 5 minutes to try to have some kind of effect, to give them a little bit more than what they thought that they were coming to Venice for. Rebbitson Unplugged started as a way that, even though I was already keeping in touch with people through social media, I wanted to have somewhere where people could go away from the noise a little bit, where they can focus on reading writings about, certainly about kosher food and recipes, but also about the holidays, about life tips, about business skills. And this was a place that I could put everything, where people could go, and like a little treasure chest, and they could open it up and give everybody the key that they could go in and take what they need when they need it. And when I was deciding on the name, my husband said, "Well, the majority of people won't know what Rebbitson is." And I said,
Mm.
"Okay, that's great, because now they will." And that's exactly that's exactly what's happened. And the unplugged aspect, some people think it's about being like unplugging and relaxing like you would on Shabbat. But really, I'm a big music fan. And we have like an orchestra of instruments in our house. And, when somebody plays, let's say, a keyboard, now they have keyboards that are so extensive that when they're plugged in, these electric keyboards, you can sound like you're playing an entire orchestra of music and you're just
Mhm.
playing the keyboard, and it's really extraordinary. And whereas there are many, many talented keyboardists, somebody can actually go to a keyboard and sound like they're playing 10 instruments at once and just, play a little something. And they're just like putting it out there and without too much effort. On the other hand, if you take something like an acoustic guitar, which is not
Mhm.
plugged in, not an electric guitar, it's completely unplugged, you can't
Mhm.
fake it.
Mhm.
What you listen to is the emes, it's the truth. What comes out of the guitar is exactly what you are. It's how you are representing yourself through the guitar. And there's no pretending there. And
Mhm.
everything that I'm giving over is Judaism and Torah.
Mhm.
And that's the emes. That's all truth. And you can't fake it. You can't fake Judaism. You're Jewish or you're not Jewish. You learn Torah, it's either Torah or it's not a Torah source. It's,
Mhm.
the Torah is extraordinary. It's the oldest history book that's completely unchanged, not one iota. You're not even allowed to add or take away from the Torah. So, this is what the unplugged is. Unplugged is that real emes, that truthfulness of coming out. And that's what I hope to keep building, this community, the Rebbitson Unplugged community of
Mhm.
all of the people who have been to us and people who have never even been to Venice. It's we have such a precious gift, every one of us at our disposal with the internet. And just like everything, it has to be used for the good. It's not about, oh, it could be used for the good or not. It's just use it for the good, period. Because there
Right.
is so much that we can do. We can bring people together, we can teach, we can learn, and we can share kindness. I've had extraordinary, extraordinary stories come through the internet. Um, I had a woman who said, I saw, we don't, she messaged me on one of the social media channels and she said, "We don't know each other, but I see your posts and I really enjoy them. Can I ask you some questions?" And it was actually about covering her hair with
Mhm.
a shaitel. And there were a lot of issues. She was mentioning about work and home and her husband and her family and her friends, and because it wasn't the custom elsewhere. We ended up taking it offline and spoke a few times. And today she covers her hair happily with a shaitel,
With a
and
wig.
with,
Mhm.
yes, with a wig. And this was about the particular level of where she was in her Judaism. It doesn't matter where somebody is holding in their Judaism. Maybe somebody's 80 years old and he just found out that he's Jewish.
Mhm.
He is just as Jewish as I am, as you are, as my husband with the long beard. Nobody is more Jewish than someone else. The Torah
Mhm.
is 100% yours, mine, each person has the Torah 100%. So, regardless of where you are holding in your Judaism, if you know something, they say if you know Aleph, if you know the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, if that's all you know, teach Aleph. If you
Hmm.
see somebody that needs help with something and you can assist them based on your Torah knowledge, go and help them. Uh, there's no hierarchy when it comes to being Jewish. You're Jewish or you're not Jewish. And, there's something beautiful that we come in contact in Italy, of course, with all backgrounds of people, different levels of Judaism, and also people who aren't Jewish. And we know that the Rebbe emphasized a lot the seven laws of Noah. So before
Hmm.
the Ten Commandments were even given, there were beautiful laws that were given to the world for everyone else. So we have interaction in an extraordinary way, not only in Venice with people, but we're able to keep in touch with them through tech and through Rebbitson Unplugged and on social. And it's an extraordinary way to be able to bring people together, even when you're not physically in the same room like today.
Right, absolutely, right. Well, this is so interesting. This is really so interesting to hear about your life, Shachar. Can you give us some tips of someone who is going to be traveling or a tourist in Venice? What should they know about, or what places should they go to? What's your favorite best tips for them?
Hmm. I would say first thing is to go to jewishvenice.org because there's an abundance of information, and that's where you can reserve for Shabbat and find out about upcoming holidays and events. Because throughout the entire year, we're there, and we have anything that's going on Jewish on the Jewish calendar. You can be assured that you can come to Venice and there's something going on. So this way you can reserve, and that would be the first place to start. Then book
Mhm.
your flight tickets. we have
Okay.
people we have people that book a flight and then they write to me and they say, "Oh, we wanted to come for Shabbat, on July 7th in the middle of the busiest part of the summer, but it's full. What should we do?" So we don't
Right.
want that to happen. So go to jewishvenice.org first and get sorted there. And we're very happy to help. And we send out an abundance of really great, pointed information to answer all the questions and to help make your trip the best it could be. And
And what would you say is your favorite tourist part, or what's your favorite place in the Jewish ghetto to, like, really think, or to really enjoy?
There are these beautiful marble park benches inside the ghetto square under trees. And it's a really wonderful place to just be able to sit and relax. And if you are a people watcher, if you like to watch the passersby, it's a really great, relaxing spot. The Chabad shul is always open. You can go in, and there's an abundance of books in all the languages. The Rebbe says it's so important that every Jew should be able to read and learn about Judaism. So we have translations in English, Hebrew, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, French. So you can always find something nice. And of course, like every Chabad house, we have a coffee bar and we have cakes, recipes on the website, of course.
Right.
And
Wow.
so people could come in and relax. So if you want the inside vibe, you've got the shul. If you want the outside vibe, the park benches there, or
Beautiful.
the ghetto square benches are really, really wonderful.
Beautiful. We're running out of time, but I just wanna ask you one last question. You have so much that you help to visitors and tourists.
Yeah.
Is there any advice or anything that you ever got from a tourist
Oh, that's
or
very
a traveler?
interesting. Hmm. You know what? Not related to anything Jewish. A mother told me when I had my first infant, and every woman, I'll just take a moment to say, any woman, any couple who is trying, uh, they should be blessed with children and healthy children and only good things. But when our first child was born, a Shabbos guest, she told me, before you put the socks on, turn it inside out, and those little strings, the threads inside socks.
Mhm.
She said always cut those out because you don't want them wrapping around little toesies.
Ah.
So it's actually a
Good point.
very important
Right.
tip. But just in closing, I would just emphasize to everybody, Venice, it's a city of tons of bridges. the important thing is to make sure that a bridge only works if it's connected on both ends. It's
That's
really
so beautiful.
important to make sure that you are connected on both ends to your physical and your spiritual, because they're really connected. They work together hand in hand, and it doesn't have to be a big miracle. It could be something small, a random act of goodness and kindness, gratitude in the morning. Any kind of little push of faith that you can do when you're feeling a little bit maybe under the bridge, so to speak.
Mm.
So just keep that connection, and it's an honor to be able to make that connection for people. And it's certainly been an honor to be here with you today.
Yeah,
You
it was
really
great
pulled
having
the
you. That was so beautiful to hear that message. I mean, of the bridges. Now we know why you are there in Venice, Italy. Beautiful.
Baruch Hashem, and we're waiting for you to come visit someday.
Oh,
You just have to
absolutely,
give me a
sure.
little bit of warning because,
Right.
I have to get my red carpet out so I can roll the red carpet out for you, and then we'll be all set. You should have
Sounds
continued
amazing.
success in
You too,
everything
and
that you're
everything that
doing.
you do, and continued growth in all your tremendous work.
Thank you
Beautiful.
very, very much, and I wish
Thank you
you and
for
your
being there.
audience the best of everything, and we hope to see you in Venice.
Thank you. Thank you for being there and for doing all that you do for all the Jewish people. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Wow, what an incredible interview with Shachar Banim. I'm always just so struck by these shluchim who are living in all these places around the world and the sacrifices that they're really making in order to connect Jews and be there for Jews. The way that she has to order her food, everything from outside of the country, the making Shabbos for 800 people at a time. Like, wow. In fact, after the interview, she was telling me how she actually made a school for her children at one point when there wasn't the online school that the Shluchim office now has made for Shluchim all over the world. But before that, she needed to make her own school and she made her own curriculum. And it was a small school just for her children. So there's so much involved behind the scenes when you go visit a place out of nowhere and you see somebody who is really there for you, servicing the community there and servicing the tourists. There's so much that's going on that person is giving over of themselves. I really enjoyed how she explained about the history of Venice. It was really incredible to hear about the ghetto there and the history of the ghetto. And I loved what she said at the end, have all these bridges in the waterways and how the bridges are there to connect us all and how important it is to be connected. And she is doing such a phenomenal job of connecting Jews who come to visit her, who come to see a little bit of the Jewish history there in Venice, or her own community, of connecting them to the well springs of Torah and the well springs of Chassidus, and just showing them the importance of a mitzvah. I loved what she said, how in the restaurant itself, she tells her workers, you have the ability of causing people to make a blessing on the food that they're eating, to eat kosher food and make a blessing. And isn't that why we're all here really in this world, to just help another person to do another mitzvah in whatever capacity that we can, whether it's servicing 800 people for a Shabbat meal or just helping our neighbor or helping our friend with something that they need to do. If you enjoyed watching this interview, I hope you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. We are on all podcast platforms as well. Give us a like. Share with us, what did you enjoy about this interview with Shachar? Was there something new that you learned about Venice? Do you want to go to Venice now? I certainly do, to visit this beautiful, unique community. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this extraordinary community.